Good afternoon. I'm sorry for being delayed, but I would like to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us here today. The recent announcement by the Department of Defense that they had suffered a major compromise of classified military computer networks has renewed discussions about what more DoD and the government should do to operate in the digital domain. The establishment of the United States Cyber Command and the announcement of a new cybersecurity strategy by Deputy Secretary of Defense William Lynn are important milestones, but we all know that more needs to be done. Today, the subcommittee is looking to discuss three main objectives for this hearing. One, to understand the planned organizational structure for the military services cyber component organizations and how they will present forces to the U.S. Cyber Command. To understand services challenges to recruiting, retraining, to training a cadre of cyber operations professionals. And three, to discuss initiatives supporting service-specific requirements for cyber operations. The purpose of this hearing is for the members of this subcommittee to learn what progress the services are making in organizing to carry out the full range of cyber operations, including computer network defense, offense, and exploitation functions. We also hope that the witnesses before us will be able to flesh out the doctrinal training and recruiting needs that will enable service concepts. So today we have four distinguished witnesses before us. First, we have Vice Admiral Bernard McCullough, III of the U.S. Navy, the commander of the U.S. Fleet Cyber Command and the U.S. 10th Fleet. Welcome. Lieutenant General George J. Flynn, U.S. Marine Corps, is the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. Major General Rhett Hernandez, the U.S. Army, is the Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff, G3/5/7. Oh, I know what that means. Oh, hi. And Major General Richard Weber, U.S. Air Force, is the commander of the 24th Air Force. Once again, I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here today. I look forward to hearing your testimonies. Without objection, we'll take your written testimonies and submit them for the record. And what I'd like to have you all is to summarize or tell us what you think we should be taking away from your testimony or what you haven't told us that's important for us to know. And we will be observing the 5-minute rule for questions from the members. As you see, I have our ranking member here, Mr. Miller, very diligent. We probably will be joined by some others, but what this will allow us to do is probably ask as many questions as we probably want to Mr. Miller. So I will now yield to the ranking member from Florida, Mr. Miller, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a full statement I'd like entered into the record. And as you know, we had a full committee hearing this morning with General Alexander. And I think it's appropriate that we take an opportunity to visit with each of the services today and see where they're going, what their issues are that they need to bring before us, because we know this is an operational area that we cannot cede to anybody. Our forces are too reliant on its capability, and its effectiveness is only enhanced by the sophisticated and expert application of its benefits. So in view of time, knowing that we have votes coming up, I'd like to again ask that my full statement be entered into the record.
Great. I thank my ranking member. And I have just been notified that we are looking at votes maybe starting in about another 20 or 30 minutes. So I think that it is incredibly important that we begin and at least get the testimony in of our witnesses. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to be before us today. And maybe we'll begin with Vice Admiral McCullough of the U.S. Navy.
Chairman, thanks for holding this hearing. We think it's incredibly important to the defense of the United States. Chairwoman Sanchez, Ranking Member Miller, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the United States Fleet Cyber Command and the U.S. 10th Fleet. Madam Chairwoman, on 29 January 2010, I assumed command of the United States Fleet Cyber Command and the United States Navy 10th Fleet. As the Navy's component command to the United States Cyber Command, Fleet Cyber Command directs cyberspace operations to deter and defeat aggression, ensure freedom of action, and achieve military objectives in and through cyberspace. While much of our mission parallels those of the other services' cyber components, Fleet Cyber Command has unique responsibilities as a central operational authority for networks, cryptology, signals intelligence, information operations, cyber, electronic warfare, and space operations in support of forces afloat and ashore. The Navy's vision is to fully develop our ability to operate in cyberspace and to accomplish this task by fusing and developing our capacity across all networks, signals intelligence systems, and electronic warfare systems. As such, we organize and direct Navy cryptologic operations worldwide and integrate information operation and space planning and operations as directed. 10th Fleet was originally established during the Second World War to develop and implement anti-submarine warfare capability and capacity. Today, the reestablishment of 10th Fleet is built upon the same principles. The operational focus of 10th Fleet and the U.S. Fleet Cyber Command will enable us to accomplish our mission across all ranges of cyber operations. To succeed, we must be able to operate freely across the electronic spectrum while facing threats that range from the mundane, such as atmospheric interference, to highly advanced threats, such as network intrusion and malicious attack. It is Fleet Cyber Command's responsibility to analyze this advanced threat and develop the tactics, techniques, and procedures necessary to defend our network and be ready to take whatever steps are necessary to freely operate across all domains. As Fleet Cyber Command continues to mature, we are finding ways to capitalize on the expertise of our sister services, working together to identify threats and establish a unified response. Operationally, we are moving out. Since our stand-up in January, we have partnered with U.S. Cybercom service components that are with me here today, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard in support of United States Pacific Command and Pacific Fleet exercises. We are reviewing our network operations to enhance shared situational awareness and the inherent security that comes from cooperative oversight. We have also partnered with industry, academia, and federally funded research and development centers during these exercises and routinely to take advantage of their knowledge and capability. The commercial sector drives this domain, and we must leverage their capacity and investment. None of our efforts will provide mission accomplishment without effective recruiting and training of sailors who are technologically savvy and able to apply their skills to the defense of the fleet's networks. I have visited all but one of my subordinate operational commands, and I can assure the subcommittee that the Navy has an outstanding force of sailors ready to support the nation across the entire range of cyber operations. We have initiatives to create new officer specialties, including cyber warfare engineers and cyber warrant officers. The establishment of a training program at the United States Naval Academy will create new opportunities to train officers dedicated to cyber operations. With any new operational area or domain, there is always room for tremendous growth. Every day I am amazed at the ability of our sailors to think beyond the traditional operational areas and to apply their expertise to the cyber realm. It is in that environment that we will cultivate and use to help recruit future experts. There is no way the Department of Defense can compete with industry in the area of monetary compensation, salary if you will, but we can provide our people with expanded opportunities for education, training, and help them build experience as leaders that cannot be matched elsewhere. My staff and command headquarters at Fort Meade is growing in strength and capacity each month. We currently operate with a headquarters staff of 130 that will grow to approximately 200 personnel over the next year, ensuring that we have the expertise needed to successfully operationalize cyber. I thank you for this opportunity to discuss U.S. Fleet Cyber Command and the 10th Fleet, and appreciate your support of our Navy and the Department of Defense. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. We'll talk now we'll hear from Lieutenant General George Flynn, U.S. Marine Corps. Please.
Chairwoman Sanchez, Representative Miller, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Let me begin by saying thanks for all you and all the other members of the House Armed Services Committee do to support our servicemen and women, their families, and especially our Marines. Cyberspace is clearly a new domain, and because it is man-made, it is something we learn more about each day. It is many things to many people. In my view, it is like terrain. It must be defended, and we must use it to gain advantage. Just like the other traditional domains, our goal in developing our cyber capability is to create the means to maintain our freedom of action, not only in cyber, but in the other domains as well. Our focus initially has been in three areas: to improve our ability to defend our networks, to create a small component command staff to support not only the efforts of U.S. Cyber Command, but also to develop the capabilities needed to be inherent in our service force structure, and also to create the operators needed to support U.S. Cybercom efforts. Accordingly, we are taking a deliberate and joint approach to our cyber requirements, and we are using some of the past lessons to inform our requirement efforts in developing our organizational, equipment, and training requirements. We are seeking to find the right balance of efficiency and effectiveness in meeting both the U.S. Cyber Command requirements and our service requirements. This is why we were joined at the hip with U.S. Cyber Command to build the necessary mission capabilities, and we will adjust our approach as we learn more about the challenges and opportunities that are assuredly ahead. I have prepared a written statement. I would request that it be part of the record, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, General. Now we'll ask Major General Hernandez of the U.S. Army for his 5 minutes or less.
Chairwoman Sanchez, Congressman Miller, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for your ongoing support of our military and for the opportunity to appear before this panel with my counterparts from other military services today. The Army established Army Forces Cyber Command as our service component to United States Cyber Command. Our mission is to plan, synchronize, direct, and conduct network operations in defense of all Army networks and mission objectives. We stand ready when directed to conduct those cyberspace operations necessary to ensure U.S. and allied freedom of action in cyberspace. We are organizing, training, and equipping Army forces to support Cyber Command's lines of operation. By providing shared situational awareness of the Army's portion of the Department of Defense information networks, we help the Commander Cyber Command exercise command and control. On 1 October, I will become the commander of Army Cyber Command. I will ensure the Army closely coordinates with other services and the combatant commanders to fully protect our digital infrastructure, and that the combatant commanders receive the cyber support they require to accomplish their joint missions. The Army organizes, trains, and equips to ensure that we can help protect and defend our nation. Cyberspace is a domain and dimension of that defense. In cyberspace, we know operations occur at net speed routinely and instantly across national boundaries and often involve multiple state and non-state actors. We are challenged to rapidly attribute adversary activity and anticipate collateral effects. We must address these requirements and undertake more robust measures to operate and defend our networks. The Army Cyber Command construct leverages years of experience and a deliberate approach that will now meld unique cyber operations capabilities from the 9th Signal Command, the Intelligence and Security Command, and the 1st Information Operations Command into one fully integrated command structure to globally command and control all cyber operations for the Army. We will use a single, and are using it today, operations center that's tied to Cyber Command's Tactical Joint Operational Center as the focal point for planning, synchronizing, and conducting cyber operations. In this organization, people will be the centerpiece of our efforts to improve cyber operations. To effectively operate, we must change our culture. The first line of defense in cyberspace is the user, and every individual must understand that cyberspace is a contested environment that we must protect. The second line of defense is our core cyber professionals who defend our networks and ensure operations. We'll win in cyberspace with the best trained and most professional personnel. To that end, we must increase our capacity to grow cyber professionals, and resources are necessary to train the cyber workforce required for this ever-changing environment. Once trained, we must keep them in the ranks. Retaining highly trained cyber professionals is essential to maintaining our ability to effectively conduct cyber operations. As our workforce matures, we must continue to quickly identify and acquire new capabilities in this rapidly evolving mission. The Army has multiple initiatives underway to improve our global network operations and defense, as well as expand our cyber capabilities. An Army Cyber Command will drive these efforts. Chairwoman Sanchez and other members of the subcommittee, as I assume command, I pledge my support to you and to our nation, and I look forward to our continued relationship. Your Army stands ready to defend and protect our digital infrastructure. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on these important matters and look forward to addressing any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Major General Richard Weber, U.S. Air Force. Hello, General.
I would like to thank Chairwoman Sanchez, Ranking Member Miller, and the other distinguished members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to appear before you and represent the dedicated and exceptional men and women of 24th Air Force. As our Secretary of the Air Force and Chief of Staff of the Air Force stated, our goal is to protect our mission-critical infrastructure, improve our capabilities, and develop greater cyber expertise and awareness to complement the entire Department of Defense cyberspace effort. 24th Air Force just celebrated its one-year anniversary, and I would like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the command's recent accomplishments. On September 11, 2010, the Air Force Space Command Inspector General conducted an assessment and declared 24th Air Force ready for the full operational capability. And soon we anticipate declaring 24th Air Force fully operational. There are numerous ways 24th Air Force has made progress towards achieving this major full operational capability milestone. I would like to touch on 4 significant examples. First, we have undertaken extensive collaboration with our fellow air components and other combatant commands to integrate cyber courses of action into their operational plans. This is a distinct transition from our legacy approach, in which cyber was relegated to a support role focused on ensuring the network rather than assuring the mission. Second, we have made strides in obtaining dedicated intelligence resources to support our operations. As a result, we are shifting from a reactive network defensive posture to one that is more predictive and dynamic. Ultimately, this will facilitate our ability to predict and deter attacks before they take place. Third, we've worked with Air Force Space Command to restructure and train our cyber professional workforce to produce capable, vigilant personnel with an operational rather than a maintenance-only mindset. Finally, we have streamlined our cyber acquisition processes. This gives our airmen the tools they need when they need them to rapidly deliver capabilities for operations in an increasingly dynamic and contested domain. Let me summarize by saying that the Air Force is committed to producing professional cyber warriors dedicated to assuring the joint mission and preserving our freedom of action in cyberspace. Because operating in cyberspace is a team sport, the men and women of 24th Air Force, are proud to work alongside our teammates in U.S. Cybercom and our sister services. I would like to thank the subcommittee for your continued support as we endeavor to meet the challenges of defending cyberspace for the joint warfighter. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Thank you to all you gentlemen. I'll remind my colleagues that we'll go by the 5-minute rule, and I'll begin by asking some questions. The first thing I would like to ask you all is there's somewhat of a difference of opinion. I've been, as you know, chairwoman since about the end of January with respect to this subcommittee and the issues that go before it, cybersecurity being one of the more newer, difficult. You all know it's a very complex issue. So some have told me that with respect to the military, everybody's got a different system, even within each department, every ship, every plane, every unit, everybody's got different, they're operating under all different systems. So my question is it your experience or your thought that the more consolidated our networks become, the more sameness we have across our networks within a service or across or even across all services, that the easier it will be to defend that? Or are we so stuck in legacy systems and upgrades and everything to all of that that we're never going to see that, and it would be easier for y'all to defend all the different systems that you each have under you? Maybe we'll start with the Admiral over there.
Chairwoman, as you suggest, as we built the network inside the military, we all sort of built it in our own way. The Navy, for instance, has 3 different systems. We have the Navy Marine Corps Internet that's transitioning to Next Generation Enterprise Network for OCONUS in Alaska, Hawaii, part of our organization. OCONUS, we have something called OneNet, and then on ships we have something called IT-21. So we've got 3 networks inside what I'll call our service enterprise network. And it's by nature of the way the system was developed. I think it's beneficial, and as General Alexander explained earlier this morning, about moving to a different type of network. And he called it computing on the edge or cloud computing. And I think it's advantageous as we move forward that we do it as a united joint, in a united joint manner. I also think it's imperative as we develop dynamic situational awareness of the networks that all the services do it in a manner that's interoperable, compatible, and takes advantage of what U.S. Cybercom does under STRATCOM to develop that situational awareness, so we don't go on a divergent path. I think if we gain that ability and capability, that the network will be much easier to defend and maintain.
Anybody have a differing approach or something y'all want to add? And this is my concern. My concern is, of course, that we not only have to worry about what's inside the services network or networks, but we also have to worry about the fact that we interact with outside networks. Let's just say contractors who are providing for us. And that the more we're one joint, the more openings there are if we're all looking at, if we're working with contractors and others. And of course, it seems to me in talking to everybody that is one of the easiest ways to break into a system is the weakest link, which is individuals sometimes inside the military, but of course, we're exponentially creating even larger avenues into our networks. Do y'all have a concern about that, or do you think just concentrating, if we really had one network that worked across everything, that concentrating all our efforts just to protect one thing would be easier than walling off into different sections everything that we do? Yes, General.
If I could add, our legacy within the Air Force was essentially a separate network for each of our major commands. So Air Combat Command, Space Command, Air Mobility Command, they each had their own approach. And each of those systems were made up of a collection of hardware and software, each with their strengths and their weaknesses. But in this arena, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so what we are doing is we are migrating over several years to a single, more homogeneous Air Force network that will be much better designed in terms of giving us situational awareness, as well as allowing us efficiencies to operate. Because when your system's not working and you pick up the phone, you want to call a help desk that knows how your system operates. Now, once you've done that, then you need to consider how you defend things in depth. If you try to defend everywhere, in essence, you defend nowhere. And so what we're asking our warfighters to do is identify to us what are those crown jewels, those mission-critical things that you must have to do your mission. For example, air mobility. You must have this op center, these key links, this hardware, this software, this data in motion, this data at rest. And then we are going to design a defense in depth for those crown jewels.
Let me ask one more question, then I'll let my colleague, Mr. Miller, ask some questions. As you're moving and evolving towards this larger network, do you feel that you have the right acquisition process that allows you to meet those needs? And I'll give you an example. When on another committee, when we were looking at a particular project, it was a very big project, we did not have the right acquisitions people within a particular department. So what happened was that the contractor was allowed to almost act as the contract officer within the department, because information and this technical skill sometimes can be easier found outside than brought in-house. So do you feel that you, and we know it from engineers and STEM and everything, but there's also the acquisition process, which sometimes has some of those people, but a lot of times doesn't have somebody so well versed in what we're actually looking to acquire. So my question to you is, do you have the ability to build an acquisition process, or do you have it in place that will allow us to know what we're asking for and really get the best systems that we need as we evolve to the future? Anybody? Yes. General.
I can tell you the three-step approach that my boss for the organized, train, and equip side of the business, General Kaler at Air Force Space Command, has put in place. And I think it gets at all the challenges of this domain. And if you would envision a pyramid, and at the tip of the pyramid are those things that you literally need in hours or days. That is done for us by our 688th Information Operations Wing. And if you see a piece of malware and you need a response to it now, these are the professionals that take care of that for us. The second stage are things you would need in the 12, 18, 24-month time frame. And in that arena, we're looking towards things like a cyber safari, which is a version of Big Safari, or even to a certain extent, the Air Force 10-CAT program is skilled at matching these kind of rapid acquisitions. And then the foundation of the pyramid is the classic acquisition where you have your PEO and you go to your product center. Although in that arena, because this domain changes so rapidly, you need to spiral develop. You need to consider block updates, and you need to make sure that you can spiral in new technologies as well as be able to spiral the requirements as the threat changes.
Thank you, General. Mr. Miller.
Reading an article from Undersecretary Lynn in a recent Foreign Affairs magazine, he identified ways to effectively defend the networks from attacks and exploitation. And what I want to know is, yes, as we continue to defend, are we combining offensive actions with our current defensive actions? And can you talk about it in this setting?
I'll take a stab at that, sir. And General Alexander talked about this this morning to some degree. And when he explained what we did in response to Buckshot Yankee, and how previous to that time we had an offensive team which was Joint Force Combined Command Network Warfare and Joint Task Force Global Network Operations. So the operations in the defense were under Global Network Operations, and other capability was resident in network warfare. And they had different levels of security clearance and access to different levels of information. And we found when we went to Buckshot Yankee that you had to combine those teams to be able to conduct full spectrum cyber operations, to both defend and operate and deter. And so within the confines of this room, we're working across the full spectrum of network operations, sir.
We've got some budget constraints upon us, and I think the chairman and I both want to make sure that we're efficiently spending all the funds that you have at your disposal. The question would be, if we need to cut any programs or any initiatives, have you identified those that we can afford to cut?
So you're talking in the area of cyber, or so that's real difficult to answer right now because we're in the middle of standing up what we're doing right now. And right now we're not looking at cutting what we're doing in cyber because this really has become something new that we're doing. We're increasing our defensive capabilities because we are more reliant on the net than we ever were. And in addition to that, we need to increase the number of people that we have assigned to work at U.S. Cyber Command on network operations. So the question, I think, is not so much what you would cut within Cyber Command. It'd be more recognizing this as something new that's happening out there, is what is old that would be the trade-off. And, for example, what we're doing in our service in the Marine Corps right now, we're conducting a force structure review group. It's to take a look at what structure you're going to need in the future. And this, I think, cyber would be one of those fact-of-life changes that is new. So what, because this is new, and what is legacy then could go away. And that's a detailed process, that what we're doing. But in cyber, if you, off the top of my head, what would you do in a fiscally informed environment? I think right now this is where the growth is, because this is something new, and it's something that changes every day. So I don't have one off the top of my head to offer on that, sir.
I've got 4 more questions that I just want to submit for the record since we've got a vote.
Certainly. We just had a vote called. We probably have about 10 minutes before we have to stop. I'd like to give the opportunity to Mr. Langevin to ask his questions for 5 minutes or less. Gentleman from Rhode Island.
Thank the chair. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, for the outstanding work that you're doing, and really talking about a critical issue, I think, that in many ways has been, in many ways still is overlooked, an overlooked element of our national defense. Obviously, cybersecurity is going to become a growing and more complex challenge as time goes on, and we are never really going to be able to get to the point where we are fully secure, because it's such a moving target. So we all have our work cut out for us, and I thank you for the outstanding work you're doing. Having chaired the subcommittee that oversaw our federal cybersecurity efforts, this is certainly along both a professional and personal interest of mine. And securing our critical data and information infrastructure is an immensely challenging and complex task, one which the Department of Defense has really confronted head-on. And DoD obviously is viewed as a standard bearer, not just for its technical abilities, but also due to a keen appreciation of the seriousness of the threat that faces our nation. For me, this is our cyber challenges, our cyber vulnerabilities are the kind of things that certainly keep me up at night. However, there's obviously still room for improvement, despite the advances that we've made and the steps we've taken, especially at the individual service level. Now, earlier this morning, General Alexander touched on one of the important issues, and that's the protection of our physical critical infrastructure. My question for you all is: many military bases are reliant on outside, privately controlled power plants or water systems. Recently, the recent public attacks, such as the Stuxnet worm, have demonstrated growing interest in targeting industrial control devices such as SCADA systems. So my question is, how are your individual services working to address these types of threats? And have there been any damage assessments performed on cyber, including control system vulnerabilities to individual bases?
Sure. One of the additional hats I wear is I oversee a base a little bit south of here. And one of the key things we've done is we've identified all our critical infrastructure. So we know where the critical nodes are, whether it be in power or water supply or anything else that may pass through the base. So the first step has been throughout not only the base down at Quantico, but throughout the Marine Corps, we have identified those critical nodes. In the area of communications, where necessary, we've created the redundancy that we need to be able to do that. But the first step in coming up with the solution is we've identified where those critical nodes are, and we're taking the steps to do what we can to mitigate them if it's possible.
Very good. General?
The Air Force is partnering with the national labs that are also working very hard on this issue. And our objective is to take each one of these vulnerabilities that are based on industrial control systems, understand how they work, and then my intent is to put out a commander's direction that would be throughout the Air Force that says if you have this fuel system or this HVAC system or this water system or this power system, it will be installed in this way, it will be protected with a firewall this way, the settings will be set up very specifically. But right now those systems are very much wide open, and we haven't even taken the low-hanging fruit steps that we need to start taking now.
Admiral McCullough?
Congressman, I mean, as you well know, these systems that you discuss are very vulnerable to attack. The Navy has worked through the Commander in Navy Installations Command to identify critical nodes in that infrastructure. Do we have a plan for alternate power sources or alternate water sources? A lot of this is single source into a base, and if you take that capacity away, you have some capability on backup electric power generation, but very little in other resources such as water, sewer, et cetera. And so our mission sets DoD networks, but we're very well aware that given the vulnerabilities of various systems that we have to work with DHS and others to get at the root issue, and we're working in that direction, sir.
And General Hernandez.
And Congressman, that's a great question. I am not aware of the level of detail that the Army has gone into identifying critical infrastructure and vulnerabilities. I will gladly take that as part of my assessment and take it as a statement and question for the record and come back to you as soon as I've completed that.
I hope we can pay particular attention to all of this. In closing, when I chaired the subcommittee on emerging threats in cybersecurity and homeland security, one of the vulnerabilities to critical infrastructure that came to light as a result of work done at Idaho National Labs was the threat to our electric grid. And again, so many of our bases are dependent on local power systems, maybe off base. And if they're not secure, then clearly our bases are not going to be secure. Idaho National Labs, through this Aurora test, was able to actually blow up cause a generator through a skater attack to blow up and take the generator out. These things aren't just sitting on a shelf somewhere where you can just plug them in. They're going to take months to build, ship, and install. So again, I hope we can redouble our efforts to pay attention to our vulnerabilities, particularly in that area and other areas of critical infrastructure, especially as it affects our bases. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman from Rhode Island. We have 6 votes on the floor, and so we will have to wrap up this hearing, unfortunately. And I say that because I know how much you all prepared to be before us today. And I'm sorry that it's, crazy season in the Congress and that we have floor votes. But I would like to ask a question before we close, and I have a feeling that many of the members will submit for the record some questions, and we would love to have you answer those for us. I recently had Dr. Regina Dugan out, the director of DARPA, out in my district, and we went to schools to talk to young people about how important and to motivate them to be in the science, technology, engineering, mathematics arena, because as we know, that really is the future for a lot of what we're talking about. Can you talk about, one of you mentioned it, I think it was the Vice Commandant, that how you motivate people to come and actually work for the military when the salary is not comparable, and the benefit package obviously is not comparable to what we see in Silicon Valley or even in my area of Orange County, California, where we have so much of this going on in the private sector. What are the challenges, and what can we do to help you to ensure that we're getting the right talent to help us with such an incredibly important issue? Any of you? Yes, General.
I think the first step has to be, how do you get the young folks hooked on the idea of working in the cyber environment and paying attention to their math and science skills? One thing that I would commend to you, and I've already commended to my fellow component commanders, is an Air Force Association program called Cyber Patriot. And basically what it is a program that teaches junior ROTC folks, so this is high school age, how to build and operate and then defend a network. And then they compete in a nationwide shootout in terms of how well did they build their network, how well did they operate it, and then how well did they defend it. So far, we're anticipating at least 300 high schools across the nation are going to compete in this. So that's one of the good ways to get these folks hooked. I think they're attracted to the training that we offer them. For each of us, these are going to be high-skilled jobs. It's going to take probably a minimum of 24 months of training, and we're all looking for ways that we can keep them at least back-to-back assignments in the mission area. But then, should they decide that they want to leave the Air Force and perhaps work for a contractor or another government agency, I think that's where the total force comes in, and I think we collectively need to place our guard units and our reserve units in the right locations, and we in the Air Force have done that, where they can just take off that suit maybe once a month and walk across the street and do these exciting missions in cyber that they have been trained in.
Great. Anybody else? Madam.
One of the key parts here is we're also going to take a total force look, and the challenge is not only getting the active duty, but as General Weber said, also the reserve. So the total force does have a piece to play here, and it's something that we can take a look at as we right now try to define what an operational reserve is, and this is one area to take a look at. And we also have to also attract the professional civilian workforce as well. The other part I would say is we have to take a look at some of our personnel practices within the services. A lot of what we do, we've never did it for money anyway, so there's a motivation that comes to cause a young man or woman to join any of the armed forces. So we have to continue to capitalize on that. But one thing that we have to take a look at is once you get somebody schooled in this area and they become an effective operator, they need to stay in it. And so we're going to have to take a look at career progression that isn't going to be acceptable to somebody not to have to do out of occupational specialty assignment to get promoted. This may be the case where once you're in cyber, you never leave cyber, something like we do with some of our special operations units. And then the other part is the training investment. We're going to have to take a look at maybe the length of our enlistment contracts. If it takes you 2 years to get somebody to be a skilled operator, then in most cases you only have 2 years left on active duty. So we have to take a look at that, and then I think what would be the appropriate incentive package. And in some cases, just like we see with young Marines now returning again and again to Afghanistan, sometimes it's just the opportunity to do what you like doing and being part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Thank you.
If I could pile on.
Yes, Admiral. Pile on. Go ahead.
Okay. I think you can recruit the young men and women based on their excitement about the opportunities that are given, the educational opportunities that are given in this field, the opportunities to have a broad scope of responsibility that you don't necessarily get in the commercial sector. And once we educate them, in the Navy, ours are 6-year contracts for these folks. Once you educate them, you've got to get them out into the field to practice this art, and then I think you have them. But we do understand monetary compensation and what the limits that we have in that area. In the Navy, we provide selective reenlistment bonuses for our cryptology technicians that do most of this work for us, up to $75,000 for a 6-year reenlistment. We also have broader educational opportunities for these folks. And so I think with satisfaction of mission and excitement about the opportunity they have, that you can generate a stable workforce in the military for this. Now, the problem is how much does the general population bear in this type of folk? And the 4 services are competing with the industry, with academia, and other federal agencies. And so does the nation, as you suggest, have the right capacity to support what we're doing in this area? Thank you.
Thank you. General.
Chairwoman, my piling on would be that in my testimony, and I firmly believe that the centerpiece and the center of gravity to our ability to operate in cyberspace is ensuring we can grow, retain, and train the right personnel. So I sign up for everything that everyone has said. The only piece I would add to this that I think is it's going to take even more than that, and we're going to have to use our imagination to think about what other things might we be able to do or need to do. And I would re-echo the Air Force comments that we need to do it earlier and do it with more scholarships earlier in the school program to identify that special talent that is critical in this field.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. Again, I'm sure that some of the other members and I also will be submitting for the record some more questions for you. I know your time is valuable. As soon as you can get those answers back to us would be great. And with that, I believe that the committee is adjourned. Thank you.